Welcome to Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston, PhD. Glenn has held his doctorate in psychology for more than 30 years and is also a former multi-million-dollar consultant to the big food industry and uses his experience to help you defeat your cravings. This show will help you to focus on dramatically reducing cravings and leave the diet mentality behind, so you can more easily and effortlessly achieve your health, fitness, and body composition goals. Please remember, no doctor-patient relationship is created via this show, and you are responsible for confirming any changes to your diet, health, or psychological routines with an appropriately licensed professional before implementing them. Now, before we get started, if you haven't yet downloaded the free smartphone app to access dozens of these recordings all in one place, as well as to avail yourself of a confidential community for support, motivation, and assistance, please visit the podcast link on defeatyourcravings.com as soon as possible. And now, here's your host, Dr. Glenn Livingston.
Hey, it's the very good Dr. Glenn Livingston. And who am I here with?
Howard Jacobson of Plant Yourself and Sick to Fit.
And we're here to have another very interesting discussion about the difference between the diet mentality and a more permanently healthy outlook on weight loss and fitness and thinness and that kind of thing. Does that sound right, Howie?
Sounds great. I can't wait.
Yeah. So I have a few thoughts about this. And Howie, I don't know about you, but most of the people that I work with, they seem like they're not just addicted to overeating, although that's what they think. They're addicted to the feast and famine cycle. They're constantly going through good periods and bad periods, and it's almost like that nursery rhyme. When she was good, she was very, very good, but when she was bad, she was hard. And I wanted to talk about what you do at Plant Yourself and Sick to Fit to help people to step out of that. I've actually written a little article, so I'm going to reference it from time to time, but there are three things that I think help people get out of that. And the first two are related.
Before we do that, can you say more about the addiction to the feast and famine cycle, like what causes that? Because I haven't really thought about that much. And it's what you just said intrigued me. It seems true. And I don't what do you think the mechanism is? Like, what is it about feast and famine that attracts people and keeps them stuck?
I think that we probably evolved in environments where food was not abundant all the time, or at least for periods of our evolution or for periods of time during the year, food was not always abundant all the time. And so we have a capacity to get by on very little food. And I also think, this is hypothetical, I can't prove this via scientific research, but it's just my own thinking about the way the brain evolved and the observations that I have with the thousands of sessions that we've done. I also think that when food is available after a period of it not being that available, that it would make sense for there to be an evolutionary mechanism that says hoard, right? So if you go through a period where calories and nutrition are scarce, then when the harvest comes, it's time to feast and get as much as you can. And I actually think this is responsible for the phenomenon of people feeling too full as a trigger to overeat more, because otherwise it doesn't make sense. I mean, do you have people that come to you and say, I was so full, my stomach hurt, but I felt like I had to have more? It was almost like someone had a gun to my head and it was saying, eat.
I know people who do that. People are just bewildered. Like, I don't know why I kept eating because I didn't want to. So I think by omission, that's what they're saying.
I think that's what's happening. And I think it was a survival adaptation. I think it's good that human beings were able to do that. I don't think you and I would be sitting here and having this intellectual discussion if that wasn't the case. But I also think it's very dangerous, particularly for binge eaters, because I think both sides of the equation, the feast and then the famine, are very primitive reptilian brain responses. So I think there's an activation of the primitive systems. There's the perception that life is really about survival. And I think that heightened experience is something that people get addicted to, the adrenaline on both sides of that. I think that the solution to that is to avoid telling your brain that you're in an environment where calories are too scarce or nutrition is too scarce, ever. If you can keep a regular, reliable course of nutrition running through your veins day in and day out with regular, reliable meals, at least for the first 6 to 12 months while you're trying to recover from binge eating, and then I do believe in the benefits of intermittent fasting or even longer fasting. I think that it triggers this mechanism for binge eaters. And I've seen so many people go into this crazy yo-yo cycle. I tell people not to lose more than a pound or two per week. Generally, a pound a week seems to be the magic number. And people will say, I have so much weight to lose. But I'll say, well, 100 pounds is really hard to lose, but 1 pound is really easy to lose 100 times. But I think the first way to step off the diet mentality roller coaster is to keep a regular, reliable course of nutrition coursing through your body all the time, and don't try to lose weight too quickly. Like, try to go about a pound a week. Mm-hmm. What do you think?
Two immediate thoughts about that. One is, it's very true for people who are focused on weight loss to limit it to a pound a week. For people who are not focused on weight loss for whatever reason, either it's because they have a more pressing health concern like cardiovascular issue or diabetes that could lead to amputation, and they're really focused on cleaning up their diet so as not to suffer in that way, they can lose a lot more weight because they're not focused on it, right? Like when people really clean up their diets and like they're scared of added oil, for example, or white sugar, and they just eliminate it. At that point, I've seen people lose 14 pounds in a week sometimes, a 400-pound body going, oh my God, thank God you're giving me a chance to do what I've been trying to do all along.
Right. And if people are focused on empty calories, if the diet has been full of empty calories, and then suddenly they're eating healthy calories, it's hard to have enough calories not to lose more than a pound a week, right?
Yes.
Especially if you're particularly heavy. I would say that also, I observed that also, I would say the first couple of weeks people lose more, then it slows down a little bit. I worked with a guy who was 500 pounds, and he lost about half of his body weight, about a pound a week, about 5 pounds a month. The first month, I think he lost 10 or 15 pounds using kind of what you're describing, but then it kind of evened out and he settled in and he said, okay, well, I did the crime. I guess I got to do the time.
Yeah. And the danger is when you lose that big weight, that you start to feel like that's your right or that's how things should go. If they're not primed for the marginal decreases in weight loss, they can start feeling disappointed and desperate and start doing crazy shortcuts to get back to that first flush of success.
Oh, I hadn't even thought about that. Yeah. If they think they're supposed to be able to lose 10 pounds a week, then they've got a rude awakening coming in for them, and they could think there's something wrong and then start being drastic, and then they're going to throw themselves into famine mode for sure.
Right. The other thought I had about this idea of famine is that I think the thing that's modulating the response to it is stress. So that if someone is feeling under stress, they're much more in limbic system, right? The lizard brain. Mm-hmm. The lizard brain under stress wants to get calories because stress to the lizard brain means something bad could happen and I might have to ride it out, right? I might get injured. I might get separated from my tribe. I'd better stock up on calories, and the richer, the better.
That's an interesting way to look at it. I never thought about that. Go ahead.
Famine was a stressor, right? Way back in the evolutionary day. And stressors are fine when they're intermittent, when they're acute as opposed to chronic. But if you're constantly worried about weight loss, worried about, am I going to get enough? If you're on a diet and the lizard part of your brain is going, oh my God, I'm starving here, whether it is or not, that perception releases all the cortisol, all the adrenaline, and it privileges the parts of the brain that are looking for a quick hit.
And so the implication of that is, if you want to step out of the feast and famine addiction, what's the implication?
Well, the implication is to understand that when you step into famine, you are feeding the stress monster. And also, I think, and in the work that I do, addressing stress and learning how to manage it and proof yourself against stress is probably the most important skill that I teach people. As you've said, you can follow your rule no matter what. And when you talk about like nighttime eating and not taking care of yourself during the day, there are certain conditions under which it's much easier and much harder to stick to your rules. The more I study about polyvagal theory and early childhood trauma and understanding how our nervous system gets wired, we've got to take responsibility for the way our nervous system interprets the environment, because it will override us.
There are some rules that you really can't make. If your whole job is to go on a hunger strike and protest for Black lives or something like that, and you don't have day-to-day responsibilities, and you're not taking care of the kids, and you're not driving around from soccer practice to soccer practice, then those people with a definitive purpose are able to go on a hunger strike and override even the strongest of survival impulses. And it's possible to starve yourself to death. It's actually possible to do that. What you're saying is that if you're not really taking care of your body, there are some rules you can't make. I always joke with people, you can't say, I will never pee again. Your bladder's going to tell you otherwise in 6 to 12 hours, right?
Right. 6 or 12. I'm impressed.
Like 34 minutes for an old man like me. You know what I mean. Okay, that's really interesting what you're saying. So you're saying that because stress in and of itself puts us into the reptilian brain that is desirous of calories because something bad might happen and we might have to rely on our storage, you need to be very careful that you don't enter a famine mentality, especially during stressful times, because that will work as double time. It's a double blow to your desire to eat healthy, because your lizard brain is going to say, now I really got to get something. I really got to figure that out. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay. Are there 2 or 3 interventions you have for people under stress to help them to step out of that emergency perception?
Well, yes. Think of it like playing basketball. You want to practice before you need your jump shot.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not just saying that because you're 6'5" and stereotyping you as a basketball player, because I don't believe you ever were, right?
I'm Jewish. I can barely throw the ball.
Oh, okay. I used to play Jew ball.
We are totally going to get comments on this now.
It was just understood that no one was ever going to touch the rim or the net or the backboard.
Yeah, there are not a lot of Jewish NBA basketball stars. It's just not there. Yeah.
On YouTube, watch clips from like the 40s. You'll see how we.
That's funny.
No one ever saw the bottom of my sneakers.
I have to say the same thing. I was good at rebounding because I was tall, but that was about it.
Okay. So if you want to hit the jump shot at the buzzer, you don't just practice hitting jump shots at buzzers, right? You practice when there's no pressure whatsoever. So the first thing I would say is learn where there is. Learn what your body feels like when it's under stress and when it isn't. So we do a lot of exercises where we ask people to put themselves under small amounts of stress by maybe thinking about a conversation that they don't want to have, or a time in their life when they were unhappy, or a worry about the future, but titrate it to like 1 out of 10, and then just notice what happens in their body so that when that starts happening, they can nip it in the bud instead of getting to a sort of full-blown amygdala hijack, foaming at the mouth, screaming at everybody, which I've been there. The most embarrassing moments of my life are looking back. I redlined on stress and I lost all conscious control over the expression of the survival drive that expressed as rage in terms of a boundary crossed or something like that. It's not fun to look back on.
So it's kind of like in a video game where you fight the small bosses before you fight the big boss. You actively seek out mini stressful experiences and practice your coping mechanisms with those lesser experiences so you can develop the muscle and be ready for the big one.
Yeah, partly that, and partly just to recognize what stress feels like as it arises so that you don't have to cope at a harder level. Even in the moment, you can say, oh, my breathing is shallow, my shoulders are up around my ears, my brow is furrowed. I know where this leads. I know how this movie ends. Let me intervene right now with a couple of deep breaths, with some muscle tension and relaxation, dozens and dozens of different stress techniques that all work in the same way to sort of interrupt the sympathetic arousal system and move me back into a place of sort of engagement with my environment. The reason is that stress, if it's a saber-toothed tiger, is appropriate. But stress in the absence of immediate physical threat is a mismatch between your brain and the environment.
Say that again.
If you are under stress, if you are stressed out and you're sitting in an office and the cause of your stress is an email or a thought about the meeting that's about to happen, that's a mismatch. Your body is preparing for fight or flight.
Got it.
And there's no fight or flight. So you're actually out of alignment with your environment. You're not living in reality.
Because your boss is not going to show up to the meeting with a bazooka.
Right. Most of us almost never experience physical threat. Now, that's not true of everyone. certainly in this country. Certainly there's a lot of violence and there's a lot of differential violence based on personal characteristics. But most of us going through the day, our stress is caused by thought patterns and unrelated to what's actually going on. And when we are constantly stressed, we're not only getting messages from the environment, we're getting messages from our body. So if you go and suddenly tense up your muscles right now and sort of turtle your neck down to protect your viscera and lift up your shoulders and scrunch, you'll start to feel stress. Your brain will go, oh, my body is protecting me from something. So it will kind of spiral the thing. So for people whose nervous systems are sort of locked in stress, and we all know people who are sort of hair trigger, for those people, I would have them work sort of deeply on a daily basis on rewiring the nervous system with sort of basic stress management practices.
Very good. Okay. Should we go on to the second idea? Okay. So the second idea is something that's kind of unusual that I don't hear a lot of people talking about, and it is related to the idea of not entering the famine mentality or the famine physiology, and that's about reaching your goal weight. You hear about a lot of people reaching their goal weight, but not a lot of them that stay there. And I think that part of the problem is that most people crash headlong into their goal weight. If you think about accelerating a rocket to the moon, they would make the trip to the moon, but they would fail to fire their thrusters in reverse so they could gently touch down on the moon. They just crash right into it. And so what happens is that there's this event. There's this discrete event. Okay, I weigh 200 pounds. Now I can totally readjust my diet to maintenance mode. And if you think about it, you're actually very quickly moving from a scarcity or physiological, I'm using the word famine loosely, but you're at a deficit that's causing you to lose weight and accelerate towards the moon, towards your goal weight. And then all of a sudden you're there. But I think it works better if people approach the moon slowly. So let's say they're losing 1.5 pounds a week. Well, when they get down to about 15 pounds from their goal weight, I'd like them to drop that to 1 pound a week. I'd like them to decelerate. And then when they're at about 10, go to 0.5 pound a week. And when they're at 5, go to 1/4 pound a week. And that way there's no discrete event. The brain doesn't suddenly perceive, oh my God, it's time for the feast mode. And adjusting to your ideal weight is more like turning on a rheostat slowly as opposed to flipping a switch. And that keeps you out of that feast or famine shock that causes the yo-yo, in my opinion.
I think that's really smart, especially since weight loss will decelerate the closer you get to your ideal weight because your body has fewer signals that you're overweight. Right?
Yeah.
They're coming in softer. So it's working with the natural structure. What I like to do with my clients at that point is I want them to have moved far beyond weight loss. You do this in your methodology in terms of like, why are you doing this, right? Whenever you coach someone, you're really focused on what's in it for you in a big and meaningful way. And so at that point, as they're decelerating on the moon, I want them to think about not like my goal is a moon landing. I need to do the moon landing. My goal is lunar exploration.
Yeah.
By the time they reach their goal weight, I want them to stop thinking about their weight. It's a useful metric, but the goal weight is so that. And I want them to really focus on the so that. You can't stand still in life. Like your body does homeostasis really well. Like when you're sleeping, it keeps your oxygen levels, your blood sugar levels within very narrow, safe ranges. But humans are really bad at just maintaining anything. And so I would rather us focus on, okay, now I've had this goal weight. What am I pursuing with this body?
Right. And that's why I tell people we're not just trying to set up a bunch of Nazi food policemen inside of us to make sure that we follow the rules. If I will never have chocolate again, it is so that I can become the kind of person who doesn't need chocolate, but really it's so that I can work in the world as a confident, thin, persuasive person who walks the walk and doesn't just talk the talk. And so I can be a genuine leader and have an influence on millions of people. And so I can feel thin and sexy in a relationship. And so that I can climb mountains and spend more time on top and have a freedom of movement that I didn't have 20 years ago when I was 280 pounds. It's so that I can be that kind of person. And I'm always raising the bar. I always want to be better because if you're not getting better, you're getting worse. That's been my experience. So I think that's a really good point. So it's not just getting to your goal weight, but getting to your goal weight so that why? That makes a lot of sense.
And that brings us to the end of today's broadcast of Defeat Your Cravings, hosted by Dr. Glenn Livingston. Now, if you'd like to find out more about the products and services Dr. Glenn offers to help you dramatically reduce your cravings and stop overeating in 90 days or less, please visit defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. That's defeatyourcravingscoaching.com. Thanks.